we'll see what happens there. We're getting a call on the OBI line here, John. So hang on 1 second. We'll get to that. But good point on the offensive line. Hi, it's the Orange and Black Insider. Who's this?
Hey, John from Kentucky. How you doing, Anthony and John? How y'all?
We're hanging in there, my friend. How you doing?
Oh, well, I'm just ascending, and I'm kind of hanging in there. Hey, Anthony, you know the difference between a risk and a gamble. A gamble, if you're 4th and 28 on your own 8-yard line against Pittsburgh, you might want to punt it. That's a gamble. But if you're on the Pittsburgh 40-yard line and it's starting the second half, that's a risk. And that's a risk you have to take. And I know you guys were talking about that earlier. And that's why we are so frustrated with this head coach. Because if you're not going to take risks against these kinds of teams, you don't win in the playoffs, you don't beat Pittsburgh, you most certainly don't go to Super Bowls. So that's my rant and frustration for the moment.
Well, it's a valid one, John, and we're getting a lot of calls here, so we're gonna get you off the air in just a second here. But I think it's a valid one. I think, as we mentioned, Marvin Lewis has, in that game, had opportunities to go for it. And, I can understand later in the game, maybe things are pretty tight. And, you kind of say, hey, let's kind of punt the ball. Let's play field position. It's raining. We are at home, all that kind of thing. My thing is, I'm a big momentum guy. And as we mentioned here, some people don't believe in momentum being an actual thing in sports. I personally think it's a gigantic thing. I think it builds confidence. I think all of that. And I think that Marvin Lewis, you get a 50-yard kick return to start the second half after you marched down the field and scored a touchdown before the half, and then you sit on the ball and punt it on a 3rd and short. I think that deflates your football team. I really do. And I think you lose the momentum that you gathered before the halftime gun.
Absolutely.
And I think that's
Marvin Lewis said, well, I didn't want to give the ball back to Pittsburgh right there. Well, he did give the ball back to Pittsburgh right there.
Yep.
Yeah, he punted it, but still.
Punts or turnovers. Punts or
You
turnovers.
tell me with the talent you had, you don't have enough confidence to get 1 yard on the other team's 40-yard line to start the second half? I mean, the average owner in the NFL, you better believe he's having words with that coach on Monday morning. But evidently, the one we have, he's evidently satisfied with all this.
Well, we're gonna keep.
You're getting a lot of. Oh, go ahead.
No, I appreciate it, John. We're gonna finish this question off the air. Appreciate you calling in. Great to hear from you as always. There's definitely more to talk about here, but hopefully you enjoy the Sunday night football game. We'll be talking about the Chiefs in just a little bit here, so definitely stay tuned for that. Appreciate the call, sir. John on OBI, not John from Kentucky. He makes a great point in that, the Bengals may have deflated, Marvin Lewis may have deflated his team by going that. And you mentioned punts are kind of a form of turning it over.
Yeah, punts are basically 40-yard interceptions. Field goals are turnovers with a participation point. Touchdowns are the only thing that matters. Like turnovers, they say they're only fumbles and interceptions. Punts are also part of turnovers. And mind you, it was a 28-yard punt. So it's like in an era where analytics is king, the expected risk of just going for it on a 4th and 1, it's so monumentally lower than just giving the ball back 28 yards down the field. So that line of thinking is just so outdated, and I think that perfectly encapsulates who Marvin Lewis is as a coach.
Yeah, totally. And what I wanted to get to was, you spend a 2nd-round pick on your quarterback, you spend a 1st-round pick a center, you spend a top 5 pick on a wide receiver, a 2nd-round pick on another wide receiver, multiple 2nd-round picks on running backs. Granted, not everybody's on the field at this point, but you have invested a lot of draft capital at skill positions for these type of situations, and you punt. I don't get that. We've got another call here, John. I believe it's from good friend Andrew Seiler. Andrew, how are you, sir?
Good. How are you guys
We're
doing?
reeling from the loss, but we're doing all right.
Oh man, me too. I was at the game, man. I was 114, section 114.
Oh wow.
I almost was in tears.
Wait, what?
Good Lord, but I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say I love you guys. I love this show, and I love the Cincinnati Bengals, and wanted to be positive. I really think, man, Dalton's going to be the MVP of this game on Sunday. 4 touchdowns and 400 yards. I'm calling it right now.
Okay. Well, that was actually where I was going with the next question. First of all, we love you back, buddy. Appreciate it. That's very flattering to hear that. But I will say this, and I guess because you have because you've given us a little bit of an Andy Dalton impression. I'll get to your score prediction in just a second. But just to harp on your point a little bit about Andy Dalton. I did some math. He's basically he's got 14 touchdowns through 6 games so far this year. It puts him on pace for 37 touchdown passes this season. Who knows if he'll keep that up, but that will break his own franchise record for single season passing touchdowns. And that says a lot. He also surpassed Boomer Esiason this last Sunday for passing yards as career passing yards as a Bengal. So quickly, Andrew, we've got some other calls, but before we do, your prediction for Sunday.
Prediction for Sunday?
Yes.
34, lucky number. 34-21. I'm going for it, man. I think William Jackson and Dre stand up. Hopefully Sean Williams can play. Jesse Bates. I think we'll all be all right.
Cool.
But do not play Cody Core. Get him off the field.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Andrew. We'll get you off the air here, but appreciate you calling in. Appreciate the compliments, right. And hopefully the next game you go to will have a little bit better results.
Oh yeah, I'm hoping.
Thanks, buddy. We missed a couple of calls. I apologize if I missed your call there. Call back. We'll get to you. Like I said, we want to make this pretty listener heavy. We do have one going on. Any additional thoughts about Andy Dalton, John, with what Andrews had to say there?
Yeah, 400 yards and 4 touchdowns is enough to get past Mahomes. I'll take it, but I do think that's probably what Mahomes is going to get as well. It's just 2 of the worst defenses in the NFL. And on a Sunday night stage, if he does that, then I think he'll answer or at least snuff out a lot of narratives, because this is going to be a shootout and it might have a lot of long drives, but in the end, it's going to be probably around 700 total yards of offense between 2 teams. So that's going to be the performance that Dalton really needs.
Yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't watch the Patriots-Chiefs game, and I luckily I was doing something kind of unique and fun myself Sunday night, but it was that score. We kind of my brother and I were together, and we kind of kept our eye on the score. And we're going, oh my God, this is crazy. This is obviously this has all the makings of a shootout going forward. The Bengals' deep passing defense is one of the worst in the league, and the Chiefs' defense, I believe, is the worst in the league. So and Andy Dalton's having a good year. Patrick Mahomes is having an outstanding year. So a lot to talk about there. We're going to get to that in just a second. We've got another call on the OBI line from our good friend Terrell. Terrell, how are you, sir?
How you doing, guys?
Hanging in there. How about you?
Oh, yeah, same here. We all know that the Bengals had a nail biter, but I just feel like we still got a good team. We still got a pretty good team. I know we down with injuries and some coach mistakes and a little bit of other things, but I think we're going to do all right. And what I was going to say was some 2 quick things. I always consider when we're going to get it for the next year's draft. Like 3 biggest things: offensive line, either guard or tackle. I could say tight end and a tackling linebacker. And my other thing was I'm ready to trade John Ross for Amari Cooper for a 5th-round pick. Why is that? Something similar to like I Like, you know how the Browns traded the running back like 3 or 4 years ago? I forgot his name.
Trent Richardson?
Yeah, that's who John Ross is to us. That's who I feel. I'm sorry. I mean, at least a 5th round pick or a 4th for John Ross, or like a strong short tackling linebacker.
Well, it's not the craziest idea in the world. We'll get you off the air here, Terrell. I know my buddy John here is a good film guy and draft guy, so we'll talk about your question off the air. Appreciate you calling in, my friend. John, I think we're giving up on John Ross a little too early, in my opinion. Now, I think if we're talking this point next year, early in the season before the trade deadline, and John Ross still has yet to make an impact, then I think that's a viable conversation. I think we need to give him, a full year's schedule at least to kind of see, and a year later trading a number 9 overall pick for a mid-round pick. I don't know if that makes sense, and who knows if there's even demand out there at this point for him. So that's one thing. I do think Terrell has valid points with guard, tackle, tight end, linebacker being the team's biggest needs. Your thoughts on both of his areas he brought up?
Didn't we just have this conversation 2 weeks ago?
Feel like it.
I get it. He's injury prone. He can't stay healthy. It may not be the extent of Tyler Eifert, but he runs, he pulls a muscle. He's out for 2 weeks. I get it. Still, he's 22, 23 years old, and he has immense value to the offense. Give him time. We just had this conversation 2 weeks ago. I'm not going to continue on about that. But definitely right tackle, right guard, any linebacker who can play in space. Definite needs for the Bengals, and John Ross is still needed for the Bengals. And if they get rid of him for a 2nd or 3rd round pick, the odds of finding another guy who can do what he does when he's on the field, it's minimal. So I don't agree with it, but because of how much needed he is in the offense, because the Miami game I think was noticeable, and I think they could have had a lot more success against the Steelers in the passing game with Ross on the field. So give him time.
Year 2, I'm not open to it, especially in a year where you've already lost Eifert. Croft's going to be gone for a long time. You saw what Cody Core did when John Ross wasn't on the field. Josh Malone, who I was really big on, has done nothing. It's basically been the Tyler Boyd, AJ Green show. So, and I think both yourself and our good friend Joe Goodberry have shown some things on Twitter and whatnot to show at least what he does as a decoy, what he brings as a decoy on the field because of his speed. So I think you still got to say, hey, the Bengals, if you match up AJ Green, Tyler Boyd, and John Ross as a trio of wide receivers against much of the league, I think that's a top 3, top 5 trio in terms of overall talent and everything in this league. So I think you got to leave that alone, especially with the Eifert injury, the Croft injury, and all of that. I totally agree with Terrell's assessment of needs. I think, and I wrote this in a post on Cincy Jungle. I think that, man, that middle part of the defense, the linebackers, even some safety help. I mean, they still can't cover tight ends. They can't cover. Kenyon Drake had a receiving touchdown against them the week prior. They need those athletic guys, and whether it's a tweener safety linebacker like a Dion Buchanan or like what who is it, Mark Barron does for kind of the Rams. I mean, whether it's getting a guy like that, they need to have someone there. And they have Bates, but Bates is learning on the fly right now.
Right.
I just kind of think that they need some of these guys and some of those types of guys in today's NFL. And
I think that it was like an anonymous defense coordinator was on record saying today that the modern NFL defense is more focused on forcing turnovers than limiting yards because of the way that the offensive game has evolved. So I understand that, every team gives up a lot of chunk plays over the middle. That's just the way that the offenses, are operated now. But at the same time, you still need to have playmakers who can cover lots of ground over the middle of the field. And that's just something that they don't have. For the longest time, we've been asking for them to get those space players, whether it's linebackers or safeties, that can cover a lot of ground from number to number, from sideline to sideline, and they just haven't been able to get that. And to add on to Charles' point, I also think that another edge player might be needed, because Jordan Willis still hasn't shown really anything, and for as fun that Sam Hubbard has been, in the splash plays, he still needs to show that he can produce pressure as well, because sometimes it's just Carl Lawson and Carlos Dunlap doing it all, and there's no one really behind him to force any consistent pressure. I think Willis is kind of on the hot seat here because he hasn't been dealing with injuries, but he hasn't really shown the necessary progress as a pass rusher.
Yeah, and that was another guy I was excited about. It kind of reminds me back in, what was it, 2012, when the Bengals selected both Devin Still and Brandon Thompson. I thought both those guys would be, really good players for this Bengals defense, and Thompson was okay at his peak, and Still, God bless him for everything he's been through and everything. I mean, I can understand why football took maybe a back seat at times, but, you kind of hope that being a Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year at some point for Penn State, you kind of figured he had a bright future, but it is what it is. We got a lot of questions. I apologize if we didn't get to everybody's call. We had other calls that we just couldn't get to. If you have some, we'll continue to try and take some as we close up here. We're gonna talk about the Chiefs in just a second. I do want to talk about this though. John, this was a question we received on Twitter at BengalsOBI from our good friend Carlos Andre. There's two things that Carlos Andre brought up. Of course, it's hashtag Fire Marvin time, and he wants to get that to go viral. We talked about Marvin quite a bit on this episode, but it's also Auden Tate time, my friend. Auden Tate. Cody Core dropped a ball that you could have handed I don't think you could have handed the ball off in a more perfect spot than the ball he dropped on a 3rd and long. Yeah, it was in stride. It was lofted up nice, right between the numbers, and just absolutely drops it. Then there was another one, tougher catch, contested. He got hit, drops one that would have been another first down. The big one, the 3rd down one, that was huge. That was just gigantic. And you don't want to crucify the guy because he's had limited opportunities as it is. So, it's difficult, but at the same time, big game, big situation. Your number is going to be called at some point because John Ross is out. You got to step up, right? So now you have Tyler Eifert hurt, Tyler Croft hurt. Core and Malone have been ineffective, so now there's a lot of calling for Auden Tate. Carlos Andre says, do you think they should have activated Tate? One could argue he isn't prepared, but come on, worse than Core, who didn't catch a pass for almost 2 years. I bet he isn't. You kept him for a reason. You like his size. I don't know. Yeah,
and the routes that Core ran, Auden Tate may not be that refined as a route runner, but I have confidence that Tate can at least box out defenders at that point. It was like a simple little post route and a little over the middle route. Yeah, just a little, it's not too complicated. But it would have been for 20 yards. Exactly. It was a big play. That's a catch that Tate at Florida State made in his sleep, and for all the knocks that were on him, that's a play that even I would expect him to make. And it's just if he can't get activated over Core, who's on the team mainly for special teams, but if he's as bad as they say he is in practice, it's kind of scary to me. And obviously this is the avenue that we've been down before with young players under Marvin Lewis who maybe aren't as bad, not in practice as the narrative may seem to be. But it's just odd that, with Ross injured, with the struggles from Core, that we just haven't heard anything about Auden Tate at all in practice. And, it's just hard to predict that changing until we see it happen, because with any Marvin Lewis decision, it's just impossible to foretell what he's going to do and how he's going to build a team week to week, just from what we see in the past. But yeah, I definitely think that Tate, he at this point, if Ross is still unhealthy, with what Core showed, at the very least, it's Malone's time to get some targets. And if he doesn't do well, then you have to turn to Tate at that point, because you have 7 receivers for a reason. You might as well use them all until you find one competent replacement. Yeah.
And, Core was one of those guys, height, weight, speed. You liked, he didn't have a lot of college production, but you liked what he put out there. He was a special teams guy that Marvin Lewis always covets at the back end of running back and wide receiver groups. So that's why he made the team. Auden Tate still raw, but I would not be surprised, especially if Croft remains out for a while. Obviously, Eifert's on IR. Maybe John Ross misses some more time. I would not be surprised as the season goes on if you start seeing Auden Tate being on the active list. Now, whether that means he's going to get a lot of passes his way or whatever and take advantage of those opportunities, I don't know. But I would not be surprised if down the road, especially with injuries and all that stuff, if Auden Tate goes forward. We have another listener question that segues nicely into the Chiefs preview. Thank you all for your calls, your texts, your comments in the YouTube chat, live YouTube chat, and Twitter, all of that, and all of the kind comments that you always give us on this program. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, a part of SB Nation's national network. We're proud to be a part of that. You can get this program on iTunes. You can get it on YouTube. You can get it on cincyjungle.com. It's also available on Art19. We're not on SoundCloud anymore, but Art19. And we're on Stitcher. We're on Google Play. I mentioned iTunes. And so a number of different mediums. Check us out. And we want you, if you're able to join us live, we have a live YouTube stream every week. We do this show that is available on our YouTube channel. So subscribe and get alerted to that. Or we're on cincyjungle.com every week as well, so you can check that out. We appreciate all of the support. Obviously, there's been a lot of excitement with some new faces around these parts because of what the Bengals have done this year as opposed to other years. And it's also good to hear from and see some of the old faces from a long time ago and from the beginning of this program showing up both on the phone lines and whatnot. Hopefully we can talk about a win next week. He's John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Gazenza. Get this program how you can. Thanks for all of your support. Get all of the opinions, news, analysis, updates, and everything at cincyjungle.com. And we'll see you next week. And hopefully we're talking about a win. Who day, folks?